When I look back now, I realize how blind I was, not just to her lies but to my own need for them. It's easy to judge a man for staying in a relationship that poisons him, but the truth is, sometimes the poison feels like the only thing keeping you alive. That was Clara to me. A fire that burned my hands, yet I kept reaching closer, convinced the pain meant something more. I first met her in the kind of place that always smells faintly of old beer and broken promises. A downtown bar, its lights dim, the air thick with smoke and muffled laughter. I hadn't gone there looking for anyone. I was tired, drifting after a long day, trying to quiet the echoes of a past relationship that had ended like all the others, sudden, sharp, leaving me gutted. Clara was there, leaning against the bar with her glass half empty, her posture relaxed, her eyes restless. She didn't look like someone searching for company, but something in me couldn't resist. Maybe it was her half-smile, sharp and sly, the kind that makes you wonder if you're the punchline to a joke she'll never tell. Or maybe it was the sadness I thought I glimpsed in her, a heaviness she hid beneath that mask of confidence. Whatever it was, I crossed the room and sat beside her. "You look like you're waiting on someone," I said, my voice too casual for the thundering in my chest. She glanced at me, amused. "Or maybe I'm waiting for something worth staying for." That was Clara. She never gave you answers, only riddles disguised as invitations. And like a fool, I stepped right into her game. We talked for hours that night, far past the point where the bartender wanted us gone. She didn't ask about my job or where I lived. No, her questions cut deeper. What was I most afraid of? What did I regret most? Did I think people ever really changed, or did they just get better at hiding who they were? I found myself telling her things I'd never said aloud, not even to friends. She listened with an intensity that made me feel exposed and alive all at once. When the bar closed, we wandered through the rain-slicked streets, her hand brushing mine until finally she slid her fingers between my own. There was no grand confession, no promise of tomorrow. Just a quiet, steady warmth and a look in her eyes that made me believe I'd stumbled into something extraordinary. But Clara wasn't extraordinary. She was dangerous. I should have seen it sooner in the way she vanished for days without explanation, the way her stories never quite lined up. One night she was a photographer chasing deadlines. Another, she spoke of a roommate I never met, only to later claim she lived alone. Whenever I pressed for clarity, she'd kiss me, laugh softly, and ask why I couldn't just enjoy the moment. And I, desperate for her, always let it go. Months passed like that, me falling deeper, her holding me at arm's length, feeding me just enough to keep me hungry. Then came the party. It was one of those crowded apartment gatherings, full of strangers who all seemed to know Clara better than I did. She moved through the room like she owned it, every eye following her. I stood in the corner, watching her lean too close to a man I'd never seen before, her hand resting on his arm in that casual way that wasn't casual at all. When her gaze caught mine, she didn't flinch. She smiled, as if daring me to react. Later, when I asked about him, she laughed, brushing it off. "You're jealous," she said, curling against me on the couch. "Don't be, he's nothing." But jealousy wasn't the right word. What I felt was the slow, sickening realization that I didn't know her at all. Still, I told myself to trust her. I told myself love required faith, patience, sacrifice. But as the weeks wore on, the cracks widened. She stepped outside for late-night calls she claimed were about work. She disappeared for weekends, her excuses vague and rehearsed. Her phone lit up constantly, but she never let me see who was on the other side. And then came the night that broke whatever illusions I still clung to. I'd gone to her apartment unannounced, carrying a bottle of wine and some naive hope of surprising her. Her car was downstairs, her lights were on, but she didn't answer the door. When I tried the knob, it turned. I stepped inside, my chest tight with unease. Voices drifted from the kitchen, hers light and teasing, and another voice, male, low, confident. Then came a silence broken by the unmistakable sound of a kiss. My vision blurred, my heart pounding so loudly I thought they might hear it. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. I backed out quietly, closing the door behind me, the wine bottle still in my hand like a cruel joke. On the street below, I stared up at her window, the glow spilling out like an accusation. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I walked away instead, each step heavier than the last. That night I realized something terrible. I wasn't just in love with Clara. I was addicted to her. And addicts, no matter how badly they're hurt, never stop craving the very thing that destroys them. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my apartment, the unopened bottle of wine on the table, staring at it as though it might explain what had just happened. My mind kept circling back to the sound of her laughter mixed with his. It was a cruel duet, one that played on repeat until dawn. By morning, my anger had curdled into something darker. Not rage exactly, but a gnawing need to understand. Who was he? How long had he been there? Had I always been sharing her without knowing? Every moment I'd spent with Clara now seemed contaminated, every memory rewritten by the knowledge of betrayal. I told myself I would confront her, demand the truth, but when I finally saw her again, I couldn't. She greeted me at the door with that dazzling smile, the one that had hooked me months ago. For a second, I convinced myself I'd imagined everything, that the voice in her apartment had been a hallucination born of jealousy. But then she kissed me, her lips warm, her eyes unflinching, and I knew. I could taste the lie on her tongue. "Where were you last night?" I asked, my voice careful, too careful. She tilted her head. "Home, why?" The ease with which she said it unsettled me more than any confession could have. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. Clara could make a lie feel like truth, as if she believed it herself. And maybe that was her greatest power, not the act of betraying, but convincing you that you were crazy for suspecting it. I wanted to walk away then, but something held me back. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the way she looked at me when she wanted something, as though I was the only man in the world. Or maybe it was the hope, however foolish, that she might choose me if I just held on long enough. So I stayed. The weeks that followed were a study in quiet torture. Some nights she was tender, wrapping herself around me like I was her anchor. Other nights she was distant, her phone buzzing with messages she never shared, her gaze drifting somewhere far beyond my reach. I learned to read her moods, to measure my words, to accept the scraps she offered as if they were a feast. But the doubt grew louder and I began to investigate, not openly, not in a way she'd notice. I checked the names that popped up on her phone when she wasn't looking. I noted the times she vanished, the excuses she gave. Patterns emerged, threads weaving a story she never told me, and at the center of it all was him. His name was Adrian. I learned it by accident when I overheard her whisper it late one night on the balcony. The softness in her voice when she said his name gutted me. It was a tenderness she never used with me. Once I had his name, I couldn't stop myself. I searched for him online, scrolling through his photographs, his career achievements, his polished life that seemed so far removed from mine. He wasn't just some fling. He was someone she admired, maybe even loved. And worst of all, he seemed to know her in ways I never could. The realization drove me into a quiet madness. I began showing up at her place without warning, desperate to catch her in a lie she couldn't deny. But she was always one step ahead. If Adrian was there, she made sure I never saw him. If she was with me, she made me feel like the only man who mattered. She balanced her worlds with terrifying precision, and I was too weak to step away. One evening, she invited me to dinner at her apartment. The table was set with candles, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air. For a moment, I let myself believe this was her way of choosing me, of proving I mattered. She poured me wine, leaned close, her laughter soft and intoxicating. And then, as I lifted my glass, my eyes caught something on the counter. A second wineglass, faintly smudged with lipstick, tucked behind a stack of plates as though hastily hidden. I froze, the realization cutting through the haze. She noticed my gaze and followed it, her smile faltering for the briefest second. It was all the proof I needed. I set the glass down, my voice low. He was here, wasn't he? Her eyes narrowed, then softened, shifting from defensiveness to something almost pleading. "You're imagining things again." Again, the word stung. It wasn't just a denial, it was a dismissal of everything I'd seen, everything I knew. She was rewriting my reality, making me doubt my own senses. I stood up, pushing back my chair. "Clara, I heard you. I know his name." Silence. Her face remained unreadable, her hands still resting calmly on the table. Then she leaned back, exhaling slowly, and for the first time she didn't deny it. "And if you did," she said softly, "would it change anything? You're still here." The honesty of it staggered me. She was right. Despite the lies, the evidence, the humiliation, I was still there, clinging to the hope that she might someday choose me. I left that night, but her words followed me. I was still here, and no matter how much I hated it, I knew I'd return, because Clara wasn't just a woman I loved. She was the wound I couldn't stop pressing, the fire I couldn't stop touching, the drug I couldn't quit. What I didn't realize then was that the worst betrayal hadn't yet happened. Clara was about to show me just how deep her lies could cut. It wasn't long before I realized Clara's deception wasn't limited to Adrian. She had a network of secrets, a labyrinth of lies that even I couldn't navigate without getting lost. Each revelation brought a fresh wave of pain, each lie another layer of poison I had swallowed willingly. I kept telling myself I would leave her, that I would walk away before the next betrayal, but somehow I never did. One night she invited me to her apartment, her tone lighter than usual. "I need your help with something," she said, her smile effortless. I didn't question it. By now, trusting her blindly had become a habit, one I couldn't shake even when my gut screamed otherwise. Inside, the apartment was dimly lit, music soft in the background. She led me to her bedroom, where piles of unopened letters and scattered photographs lay across the bed. "I found these," she whispered, as if ashamed, though the faint smirk tugging at her lips betrayed more than it hid. "I didn't know how to tell you." I picked up one photograph. It was Adrian with her, laughing, close enough to touch, smiling in a way she had never smiled at me. My chest tightened, my hands trembling. I don't understand," I said, my voice barely audible. She shrugged, brushing her hair back. "It's complicated. You think you understand love, but you don't. You think you can measure it, claim it, contain it. You can't. Not with me." The casual cruelty of her words hit harder than any lie I had uncovered before. She wasn't apologetic. She didn't even seem guilty. She existed in her own reality, and I had been nothing more than a visitor. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I realized that doing so would only feed her power. Instead, I swallowed the words, left the photographs untouched, and walked out of her apartment, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like concrete. Days later, I ran into Adrian unexpectedly at a coffee shop. He looked as sharp and self-assured as ever, but his eyes held the same weariness I recognized. When I approached, he didn't flinch, though his hands tightened around his cup. "You're with her now?" he asked, his voice quiet but measured. I hesitated, unsure if honesty was worth it. "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "Good luck, she'll break you." We didn't say more. Just that glance, heavy with shared understanding, was enough. He had been burned by her fire too. Clara, meanwhile, continued her relentless charm. She would appear at my apartment unexpectedly, smiling, laughing, touching me in ways that made my chest ache. And I, powerless against the pull, would melt. Every kiss, every touch, every whispered word made it impossible to leave. Even knowing the truth, I was addicted. Then came the moment that finally shattered the fragile illusion I clung to. It was a weekend trip she suggested, somewhere far from the city, a cabin in the woods. I should have refused, should have stayed away, but I didn't. The cabin was idyllic at first, fire crackling in the hearth, the scent of pine filling the air, long walks beneath the bare trees. For a while, it felt almost like we were alone in the world, disconnected from lies, secrets, and betrayal. But isolation only magnified the tension. One night, while she slept beside me, her phone buzzed quietly on the bedside table. I stared at it, heart hammering. The screen lit up with Adrian's name. Even here, even in our supposed escape, he was with her. I realized then that my love for Clara wasn't enough to keep her. No matter how deeply I cared, she existed on her own terms, and those terms didn't include me exclusively. The next morning she awoke bright-eyed, cheerful as though nothing had happened. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation, but I didn't. The poison had become familiar, and familiar can be comforting in its own twisted way. By the end of that trip, I understood something essential. Clara wasn't just untrustworthy. She was untouchable. No amount of love, loyalty, or pain could tether her to anyone. She was a storm I couldn't survive, yet I kept returning, drawn to the chaos she embodied. And I knew with a sick certainty that the final blow, the ultimate betrayal, was still waiting. After the cabin, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way she laughed at messages that weren't meant for me, the subtle glances when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her fingers lingered over her phone as though reading some secret I wasn't meant to know. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew better. I had glimpsed the truth, and now it followed me, persistent as a shadow I could not shake. One evening she left for a friend's dinner and didn't come back until the early hours of the morning. Her perfume lingered in my apartment long after she had gone, a haunting reminder of her presence. That night I couldn't sleep. I scrolled through the messages she had left open when she stepped away, pieces of conversations I wasn't supposed to see, fragments of a life she led outside my knowledge. The names were endless: Adrian, Lucas, someone else I didn't recognize. Each name a dagger twisting deeper into the fabric of my trust. I confronted her once, finally, after weeks of torment. We were in her apartment, the rain hammering against the windows, the room dimly lit. I held her gaze, the fury and sorrow I felt battling for dominance in my chest. "Clara," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "how many?" Her smile was faint, almost imperceptible. She didn't answer immediately. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a puzzle she had solved a long time ago. "How many what?" she asked, her tone deceptively innocent. I could feel the walls of my sanity trembling. "How many men, Clara? How many?" She laughed softly, a sound that had once made my heart skip but now made it ache with despair. "Does it matter?" she asked. "You're still here, aren't you?" Her words were venom disguised as truth. She wasn't denying anything. She was daring me to leave, testing my limits, seeing just how much I could endure. And foolishly I stayed. Weeks later I learned of Daniel, a man I had never heard of, calling me in the dead of night, his voice trembling as he explained he was another part of her tangled web. She wasn't juggling just two men. There were more, and I was now just another name on the list, another soul caught in her intricate, merciless dance. The realization was devastating. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Every memory with Clara felt tainted, every kiss and embrace now a cruel mockery of sincerity. I felt rage, despair, and an emptiness so profound it seemed to consume me entirely. And yet, despite it all, I couldn't let go. Her hold on me was more than emotional. It was chemical, a fixation I couldn't break. Then came the final confrontation. It was unplanned, raw, and terrifying. Clara had invited me to her apartment under the guise of intimacy, and I arrived, my hands shaking, my mind racing. I needed answers, or at least some fragment of the truth. I found her waiting, as always, calm and poised, yet something about her stance suggested she sensed the storm I carried. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to speak. "Clara, I know about Adrian, I know about Daniel, I know about all of them. Why? Why do you do this?" Her eyes, wide and unflinching, held me captive. For a moment I thought I might see regret, but there was none. Instead, there was a quiet, chilling honesty. "Because," she said finally, her voice low, deliberate, "I'm not meant to be owned. I'm not meant to be tamed. And I don't love in the way you want me to. You loved an idea, not me, and I gave it to you." The room seemed to spin. I realized then that every moment of tenderness, every whispered promise, every shared smile had been carefully curated, a performance tailored to ensnare me. I had loved her completely, and in return, I had received a meticulously constructed illusion. That night I left. I didn't slam doors, didn't yell, didn't cry. I walked out quietly, each step heavy with the weight of what I had lost, but also with the faintest flicker of clarity. Clara would continue her life, spinning lies, weaving truths and falsehoods into something no one could touch, but I would not be a part of it anymore. And in that quiet walk through the rain-soaked streets, I began to understand something vital. Love can be intoxicating, but some people are not meant to be loved. Some are only meant to teach you how deep betrayal can cut and how strong you must become to survive it. Walking away from Clara was nothing like I imagined. It wasn't a triumphant escape or a cleansing liberation. It was quiet, excruciating, and filled with a void that seemed to expand with every step I took. The knowledge of her betrayals didn't vanish when I left her apartment. It followed me, a shadow stitched to my skin, whispering every lie, every touch, every stolen moment that had never truly been mine. For weeks I didn't call. I didn't answer her calls. Every text went ignored. Yet the memory of her laughter, her scent, the way her hand had fit perfectly into mine haunted me relentlessly. The addiction to her, to the thrill, the pain, the intoxicating chaos, was still there. I felt like a man carrying an invisible wound that refused to heal. Then one night I saw her in the city. She was with a man I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulders, her head tilted toward him, laughing that same sly, untouchable laugh. My chest tightened. I wanted to approach her, to demand answers, or maybe to collapse and cry like I hadn't in months. But I didn't. I turned and walked away, the rain mingling with my tears unnoticed, blending the physical world with the ache inside. The weeks turned into months. I learned to live with the emptiness, to carry it like a companion I didn't want but couldn't abandon. I met other women, yes, but no one could touch the imprint Clara left on me. The betrayal, the obsession, the impossible allure. She had reshaped my capacity for love and trust, leaving me wary, haunted, and strangely alive. I sometimes wonder what happened to Adrian and Daniel. I imagine them walking away too, shaking their heads at the power she wielded so effortlessly, scarred but stronger for it. And sometimes I wonder if she ever stops, if she ever feels the loneliness that her deceit eventually breeds, or if she thrives forever in the chaos she creates. For me, the lesson was brutal but clear. Some people are not meant to be saved, tamed, or loved the way we think we can. Some exist only to teach you the limits of your heart, to show you how deeply betrayal can cut, and to force you to confront the parts of yourself that crave what destroys you. Clara was one of those people. I loved her. I believed in her. And in return, she left me hollow, reshaped, and aware of the dangerous beauty of letting someone control your heart entirely. The hardest part of leaving her wasn't walking out the door. It was the slow realization that she had left a permanent mark. I think of her sometimes, years later, in fleeting glimpses, a reflection in a window, a laugh in the distance, the echo of a touch that once set my soul on fire. I feel the pull of what we had, and then I remember the pain it brought. And I make a choice. I choose myself. That choice, more than anything else, became my salvation. It didn't erase the scars or the memories. It didn't untangle the years I had devoted to a love that wasn't mine. But it gave me something I hadn't had before: freedom. Freedom to breathe, to rebuild, to love without fear of betrayal, to exist without the weight of someone else's deception pressing down on me. Clara will always be a part of my story. A storm I couldn't outrun, a fire I couldn't touch without burning, a lesson written into the very marrow of my being. And though I carry the wounds she left, I carry them knowing that survival sometimes isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about walking away, no matter how much it hurts, and choosing to live in a world where you finally belong to yourself. I loved her, I lost her, and in losing her I found myself.